Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 247 DIY, and another episode where we're jumping into my old Craftsman 917 riding tractor that I've been setting up to be a dedicated snow blowing tractor. Last video we went ahead and got the snowblower attachment hooked up and everything's all set to go with that. But today what we're going to be doing is jumping into some safety related stuff, and that's going to be upgrading the lighting here on the tractor. Specifically adding an LED light bar into the front headlight lens here, as well as adding tail lights to the rear end, just to add some visibility when I'm maneuvering the tractor down at the end of the driveway on the main road. So stick around for that. So you can see that the front end lighting on this tractor is pretty dim. It probably served its use for what you would expect out of a lawn mowing tractor. There's not too many people that are going to be out late at night mowing their lawns, you know, maybe in the dusk of the evening or something like that. But I work relatively long schedules, which means I'm typically snow blowing in the dark of the early morning or the dark of the late evening. And I need to get something brighter in the front end. So that's why we're going to be going ahead and installing this LED light bar inside of the hood on the front end. So first of all, don't mind the state of the hood here. This hood has definitely seen better days, but it gets the job done for now until I can find somebody willing to sell a replacement for a reasonable price. The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and we're just going to remove this harness. I'm not even sure I'm going to retain these factory lights or not, but for now we're just going to get this out of the way. Next, what I'm going to do, I just want to pop out the clear lens, because what I would like to do is set that LED light bar inside of this recessed portion of the plastic front end. That way we can put the lens back on and that LED bar will sit behind the lens and have a little bit more of a factory look. Real simple to pop that out. Just some hook tabs here. You just press those down with your fingers and that'll pop right out. And so what we're going with here is this, I believe it was a 10-inch light bar. I picked this up on Amazon. I'll be sure to leave the link below if you're interested. First things first though, I want to get this plugged into that recess area, at least just set in there, and see if it's even going to clear the lens or not. All right, so it does look like in order to cleanly get this light bar mounted up in that recessed area and then not cause the lens to be popped out, I am going to have to cut a bit so that I can recess this light bar back into that space just a little bit. And it looks like the height of that is actually pretty spot on with where I want it. Pretty easy to access Allen screws here. I can always just pop this light out and adjust this later on down the road if I think it's too high or too low. But for right now, I'm just going to tighten it down as is. All right, well, I guess that's what you get what you pay for there with buying some cheaper stuff. There's not a lot of thread engagement where they put these provisions for the brackets. So this one stripped out that first couple of threads. I'm going to see if I have some longer hardware I might be able to work up over here on this side. Okay, so what I ended up doing, because I really wasn't even able to get that screw to bite, I actually took the whole light out, brought it over to the vise, and I drilled out the holes and re-tapped them to 1/4 20 because I have plenty of 1/4 20 hardware. And all it needs now is just a washer on both sides of these 1/4 20 bolts, because I don't have, I guess what you would call plunge taps. I don't know if that's the correct term. I just have through taps, so I wasn't able to cut the threads too terribly deep. So using the threads that are cut and then just a washer on each side as a spacer. We sorted out the problem, and we can get the lens back in. Let's go ahead and clean that up real quick first. There we go. How much better does that look? If you're curious, I use this 3-part Novus system. I've been using this for years. It's great for headlights on vehicles and things like that, but works wonders just for general plastics. This was pretty oxidized and faded and looks almost brand new right now. Okay, so the lens is actually just shy of being able to sit flush. It is just contacting the light bar here on the corners. Guess that's why they say measure twice, cut once. But being that this hood has definitely seen better days, I'm not too concerned about that touching the lens. If you're a perfectionist, we could always move that back further, but I'm happy with how this is sitting right now. So now we need to move on to figuring out how we're gonna wire it up. And one thing I'm not going to be too worried about is the fact that we have this large open hole here. Obviously, we can't utilize the plugs that were there anymore, but the lens itself doesn't even seal to the front, and this LED light bar is a sealed weatherproof unit, so I'm really not concerned at all. If water does tend to get inside of there, it's not going to be a big deal. It will drain out the front. Like I said, the lens isn't even sealed to the front of this, and the LED unit itself shouldn't be bothered by any water because it is actually meant to be mounted exterior of whatever vehicle you're mounting it to. It is weatherproof, but we're going to go ahead and move on to the wiring. So what I'm going to do, since we can't go ahead and use these plugs anymore because we cut the sockets in half anyway, is we're just going to scavenge what we need off of this harness, mainly just this plug right here. So we're going to go ahead and cut it. Okay, so my battery died and I changed the battery and forgot to hit record. We didn't miss much. I just crimped the brown down to the positive side here and the black down to the negative side. We'll go ahead and get this heat shrink on here, finish up the wiring end of this. So now let's get it plugged in and check it out. Okay, so overall, I'm sure you saw there when I was in that shot coming over from here to there, you can actually see, and I kind of thought this was going to be a problem, that it casts a pretty big shadow in front. Now the light itself does sit above the snowblower. I was kind of thinking that if I did run into this issue, I could pick up a second one and just mount it to the top of the hood, but that's still not too much change in height from there to there. I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. So what I may do, like I said, is even though this is going to be kind of the last video for now until the winter gets here, when the winter does get here, I may do another video because I have a couple of small little things I didn't have the parts on hand for right now when I was making this video, is just put a light bar right up here on the top edge of the snowblower, kind of facing, you know, at a slightly downward angle out in front of me, and then just run some wire with some protective loom up here to another disconnect so that I can disconnect that, and it'll have its own light bar right up here on top. So that's probably what I'm going to end up doing, but that's going to have to wait until a later video. But let's go ahead and move on to getting the tail lights wired into the rear end of this thing. Okay, and so for the tail lights, these are what I went with. Another grab, I just picked them up real fast on Amazon. These are wired up so that they can be a brake light as well. Obviously, that's really not something I need on the tractor. I'm not going to bother wiring that up. The difference really being is that it's a lower brightness for your tail light and a brighter output for your brake light. I'm probably just going to wire them to the brightest output, and they'll just be bright all the time for my taillights. And you can see I got a second set over there because I realized afterwards, yes, it's going to be nice to have these on the rear end of the vehicle, but when I'm considering safety at the end of the driveway, say I've just turned around and I've started to come back in from the road doing the driveway, being visible from the side is going to be important. So I'm going to have 2 on the rear where you would traditionally see a taillight, and then 2 on the rear side fenders, just to have some visibility from the side of the tractor. So as far as mounting these, it's not going to be anything too crazy. I'm just going to kind of arbitrarily pick 2 spots on this side, and I think really the only challenging part is going to be getting the measurements right to make sure that I put them uniform on the other side. Not too terribly concerned if they're exactly in the same location, but I do want it to look symmetrical so it doesn't look like a complete hack job. Now, one thing I wanted to do was actually to put some nut certs in there. I think it would have been a lot cleaner, a lot easier for the install, but I don't have any nut certs for this size hardware that was provided. I guess I could have used different hardware, but since they're already including it, might as well use it. It is what it is. It's not a big deal. So I'm just going to throw the foam gasket on there and get all 4 of these installed. Okay, so I jumped a little bit ahead on the wiring here. Figured I wouldn't bore you guys too much with that. But as far as these lights are concerned, the white wire is our ground, and we're going with the high output, like I said. So that's our red. I've just connected these up to a little run of wire here. We will run that over this way to the other lights, and we'll just continue to daisy chain these over to the other side. And then as far as the unused low output function, I've just butt connected those together. I'll fill each side with some glue and then some heat shrink over top of that, just to keep the water away from it and prevent the possibility of getting a short circuit or something from these unused ends. Okay, and so same thing right here on the right side. That jumper wire comes over from the left. This taillight right in front of us comes down, and on this side, the taillight from over here comes out to this side, so everything is daisy chained together, and then this wire runs up to the front, which I'll show you in a minute. But let me go ahead and get all this wiring cleaned up in its final position. I'll show you how I went about and did that and get everything nice and neat, and we'll move on to routing it to the front of the tractor. All right, so we've got everything tidied up. All the wiring is done. Let me get you up underneath the fender here. You can see we've got everything wrapped up in harness tape. I just used some self-adhesive zip tie mounts to hold it up. And then we come back up underneath the rear end, all the way over to this side over here. And then we just route it up underneath the fender there. And then it drops down through a hole that was already existing in the frame where it meets up with the existing wiring that goes from the battery to the front of the lawnmower. It's basically gonna be impossible to get the camera down here, but essentially it's right on the other side of here. That wiring from the battery to the front of the mower lays in there, and then you can see we've got our wire hanging out, coming out up over there. Okay, so what I've done is, you can see I left some wire here. I intentionally cut it long. All I did was temporarily hook these wires up to some spade connectors, and they're in the plug that would normally go to the hood. We'll finalize this wiring in a second, but I just want to make sure that these lights are going to work this way before we go ahead and cut into this existing harness. With that, I've got everything wrapped up. I do realize I probably could have spliced everything in a little bit further back here, but I figured it was just as easy to run the new wire up through the loom, cut off the connector here, and then spliced everything together. You can see this sort of fatter part here, but it clips right down in the factory spots, and it should light up in conjunction with the front headlight, but there's only one way to find that out, and that's just to go ahead and try it. So there we go, guys. That's the lighting all wrapped up. I'm honestly really happy with how everything turned out. Really wouldn't change a whole lot of anything. Like I said, I did identify that problem with the front headlight being behind the snowblower attachment and down low. It does cast a pretty big shadow out in front. So I think what I'm gonna do is we're gonna have one more video before the winter time, just knocking out the last couple little things. And I'm gonna add a couple lights to the very top of the snowblower attachment so I can see well enough out in front of me, as well as a little bit of a modification. I saw somebody else do, so it's just gonna be kind of a copy of something I saw somebody else do. A little modification to the snowblower attachment for going over turf so that it doesn't dig down too low. And then I still need to go ahead and sort out a weight for the rear end of this thing for traction. So stick around for that next episode. And then there really won't be anything until winter time, but I'll be sure to go ahead and film this thing, getting it out in the snow, showing you how it works and letting you know how this attachment works hooked up to the Craftsman tractor here. So as always, guys, if you like the video, be sure to hit that like button. Feel free to leave a comment below, and if you're not subscribed already, please consider subscribing. Thanks.